Hey guys, so big apologies that the first episode in this series was just talking and not any sort of work, but I just wanted to lay out the plan because that is an important part of the process, is to have some sort of plan. It's not necessary, of course, but I think if you don't have any sort of plan at all going into a project, you'll just kind of end up freewheeling and probably wasting a lot of time and probably end up with something that looks like you didn't have a plan going into it. So this one, as you noticed in the first episode, my plan isn't completely fleshed out, but I kind of know the general idea of the modifications and things that I'm going to do. So I'm going to start off with the torso. So in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at modifying this little torso, and little it is. It's a little bit too short, so that's the first thing we're going to do is make it a little bit longer. So I actually considered using just the torso from the gym as well, just modifying that with these some parts, but I think I'm just going to work on this. And also, I was kind of on the fence about doing this as well, but I'm going to use this ball and socket joint from the Baldwin arms set here. I was on the fence because I really don't mind just the joint that we have here. I really don't care too much about the shoulder articulation of this kit, but just for the point of showing it to you guys, I'll just replace this. So as it is, I mean, that's not going to move anywhere with it just being a straight peg, but the arm can still rotate and move up and down and all of that too, and really not all that far up, so we're going to modify that too when we're talking about the arm. But in this episode, we're going to focus on the torso. So I am going to replace that elbow joint here with this ball and socket joint. So basically I'm going to set this part inside the torso here, and then that will give a little bit more articulation there at the shoulder, which will be nice. Now the only thing is that this kind of barely fits through there. I kind of wish that this peg on here was a little bit longer. I think it'll be okay though. Like I said, I'm not really too worried about the articulation there, so I'm not going to be moving it around too much, but we'll see here. So the first thing is we need to take it apart. Another thing that I'm going to want to do is make it so that the gray part is able to be separated from the blue part, while being able to connect the blue part together. So basically, as it is now, this gray part at the bottom is held in by these blue parts being held together. Now while I'm here, I guess I might as well answer this question because I do get asked sometimes about disassembly. Some people ask me like what kind of tools I use for disassembling kits, because I do emphasize that you should assemble kits first before painting and then disassemble again, obviously before you want to do your painting, just so you can get a good feel for the kit and everything. But of course disassembly is not always easy, so people are worried about breaking pegs and just how to get the parts apart, separated without damaging them. And personally, I wouldn't worry too much about breaking pegs because they're usually going to be 2 or 3 or 4 pegs holding parts together, so if you break 1 or even 2, it's really probably not going to be too big of a loss. I've broken plenty and it's really not that big of a deal. But what tends to be my go-to separator tool is this, it's just like a Tamiya. It's supposed to be like a stir stick for stirring paint, but this end here is just a flat end there. And it works pretty good to pry things apart. Now you can use your just hobby knife blade as well, but that being a little bit too sharp will pretty easily damage what you're working on. So here you can see there's pegs here that hold this in place between the blue parts, and basically what I'm going to do is just cut those off. And apparently one already broke off inside there, so that's okay. I'm not going to worry about trying to take that out. I'm just going to leave it there and just cut off whatever is sticking out. Clean these up as well, just so that's nice and flush. There we go. And since I had such trouble pulling these blue parts apart before, these pegs here, I can just cut the ends of those a little bit so that these parts will be easier to put together and take apart. Eventually, ultimately, they are going to be permanently glued together, so I'm not really too worried about that. So right at the end of the pegs here, you just want to cut a little bit at a 45-degree angle, like that. And these pegs aren't very long, so I don't want to cut too much. I do need still some peg there. But all 4 of these little pegs there, I'll just cut at an angle at the end. And I don't really know how or why, but exactly, but that gives you less friction and it's easier to pull the parts apart later, so you can see like that. Now the other thing is that these vents are stuck in there pretty well, and it's not easy to pry those out, so what I'm going to do is drill a hole in the back so I can punch those out from the back. So here I got my pin vise, another essential tool of course, and it doesn't really matter what millimeter you use. I think this is 1.5, but in this case that will work fine. So I'm just going to drill into the back of here. You can sometimes the kits will have like a hole already punched out, so that'll make it easier for you. In this one, you know, Bandai just kind of, their brain wasn't really on when designing this kit, so they didn't think to do that. So I can just drill a hole through here, through to the back of the yellow part, and that already pushed it through without me having to use any other sort of something. But if that hadn't have just fallen out by itself, then I could just use just something sharp to just poke that guy out. So set that off to the side, pull out this other one as well. Right, now like I said, these two blue parts are going to be permanently fused together, so that means once these are put together, it's going to be really, really difficult, more difficult, and still not really too bad. I could drill out down here again more as well, but it's not going to be easy to get those yellow parts out again, so before I put these parts together, I'm just going to leave those yellow parts out and probably not put them back in again until once they're all painted. Then I can just, once it's all painted, then just drop them in there and they'll be in there permanently. So now that we have this closed, we can see how this gray part will fit into there, no problem. Should just pop into place like that, and it does, but the problem is now it's loose, it doesn't want to stay in there. Obviously without the pegs holding it in, that is to be expected, but again, doesn't really matter for now, just as long as it can be held there. I could put some glue, or I mean I can put some tack or something in there, to hold in there temporarily. Which I may do later just to check out the fit, or just check out the size, but again, once it's all painted, I'll just put some glue on that and just glue it, and then it'll be there stuck permanently. So what I want to work on is this part, so we're going to make this a little bit longer. I want the chest to be, or just the torso to be longer. So basically what I'm going to do is just sand the bottom of this, just file that smooth, and then just stack some plot plate, just like you would for extending a limb, a leg or an arm or something, by just stacking some plot plate. That's what I'm going to do with this as well, and then just have the center part cut out. So let's just get to filing this. Unfortunately, this raised part here, which is keeping it from being flat, is not that large, so it would be nice if I could just saw that, but there's barely anything there already, so just gonna file this. Still gonna take a little while with the file though. Something like this, I guess you'll just figure out different ways to do it. I'm finding it easier to just lay the file down and just kind of move the part rather than move the file. So after a few minutes, we get the bottom of that piece nice and flat, and now it's just a matter of stacking plot plate however much we want. I think I'm gonna go for about 3 millimeters? 4 millimeters. Should we make it really long? I think 3 millimeters will probably be pretty good. 4 is gonna start to push it to be a little bit ridiculous. So here I've just got some 1 millimeter thick plot plate. I guess it might be easier to use a pen or marker or something, but I would just like to use mechanical pencil. But on just the plot plate itself, the mechanical pencil doesn't really work. It's too glossy, shiny, slippery, slippery. So this part here, I've just kind of sanded a little bit with a file, so it should write a lot better on there. So I just want to get a general idea of the size of that. It's going to be something like this. So I'm going to need 3 rectangles of about this size to stack up. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. So you don't really have to be too scientific with it because we're just going to be cutting this down anyway. Just going to pull out my straight edge ruler and this Tamiya plastic scriber 2. I really pretty much use this just for cutting plot plate. You can use pretty much anything. Some companies make like some plot plates like scissors. Godhand makes some like new tool that just came out earlier this year or something, I think, that a lot of people have been really liking. Or you can just use the back of your hobby knife. That is another viable option as well. Pretty much anything, doesn't really matter too much what you use. Alright, then we can just break these off. 1, 2, and 3. Now just going to give these a file with the sanding stick here. Like I said, the edges really don't matter, but you just want them to be able to lay flat on top of each other so that you get a good hold between the glue between them. Now I know inevitably someone is going to ask what is the grit number of this sanding stick that I'm using now, and for this one actually I don't know. I have no idea. This one is actually, if I remember correctly, I think this is just a random nail file that I think my wife was gonna throw out or something. My wife does nail art. She was just gonna throw that out or something and just gave that to me to use instead. So I've got my 3 stacks. Andre 3000 over here, and those are going to be able to be glued together and then glued to the bottom of here, and then we can clean that up and then we'll have a longer torso. But wait! We need the peg from the skirt section to be able to go up into here. So we're also going to have to drill some hole through here. So I would normally just glue them to the piece first, but in this case I'm just going to glue these three parts together first and then drill a hole through them before fixing this actually onto the gray part there. So as usual, just going to use some Tamiya extra thin cement for gluing these three plates together. We'll glue these together and give them some time to just for the glue to work its magic before I move on to drilling through them. Sorry, trying to focus on what I'm doing while also focus on talking to you guys. Alright, so those are together and bonded. Now let's set those aside for a second and talk about something else. Now let's talk about the upper torso. There's two big changes that I'm going to make. The one change I already mentioned, I'm going to be changing out the arm sockets there. The other change is that I don't like these vents here on the top. These things here, like on the front, they look okay, but what's with this downward angle at the back? I just don't like that. It doesn't look good, and just the shape of this whole action here is just not really doing it for me. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, luckily, Panda has been nice enough to provide a nice flat line across the bottom. So that means I'm just going to wipe that out. Well, not the whole thing. This whole raised part above that flat line, just going to wipe that out and then just make a new kind of vent thing. And basically I'm just going to make it like square. I know that sounds boring and it's probably just for ease, but I think that will just generally look better. Just for reference, let me put the backpack on there for you guys. So as you can see, basically what I'm going to do is use a different front vent part here, and then this is going to be flat across the top there, kind of perpendicular, or I'm sorry, parallel to this line here, so that'll just be flat and that'll just be kind of just going to the backpack like that. So it's not going to be anything but I think making the chest look more bulky, making this whole part just look a little bit bulkier by having that part built up a little bit more there on the sides of the torso. So I think that'll be good. First thing let's do is just go ahead and lop these guys off. Now I just want to take a couple cuts here. Alright, so after some chopping and filing, there you go. We got a flat surface there where the arm socket used to be. And now we have our new one. Now we're probably going to be able to use the pencil again. I hope so, if that'll show up. So this new arm socket, this part needs to fit inside of there, so I can just kind of do it reverse. I can see kind of where I need to cut, and I can hopefully draw a line. Hopefully we'll be able to see this pencil on the dark blue plastic. I'm just going to hold this where I'm going to want this to be sticking out and then draw a line that I know where I need to cut out of here. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit hard to see, but luckily from the glare of the light you can see that outline a little bit more. So you can see the section where I'm going to need to cut out from there to make sure that this fits. When we open it up, oh no, there's all sorts of stuff going on inside of there. What are we going to do? We're just going to have to cut more. Now there may be a more elegant way to do this, but I'm just going to kind of just start cutting with my hobby knife here carefully. As our good buddy Link says in regards to painting, the same kind of philosophy, at least for me, applies here when it comes to doing modifications like this as well. And that's we want to just start rough and then finish smooth. So it's going to look like crap at first, but hopefully in the end it won't still look like crap once it's cleaned up a little bit more. So a few minutes later, I've got it to this point here. Now that still looks pretty rough, of course, but I can see that this part is almost fitting in there. So I want to make sure that it's a pretty tight fit. So now that I'm pretty close, I can switch to being a little bit more, how do I say, gentle with it. And I'm going to use a circular file instead. So just kind of want to circle, because this is supposed to be round for most of the parts. It's flat on the top and bottom, but the sides are round, so those are the areas that are going to be a little bit more difficult. The flat parts I can actually still do with my knife if I want. Alright, so it's a little bit more pretty now, and this piece fits in here perfectly fine on that side, but it's actually meant to be the other way around. But sticking it in that way, it's just a little bit too much peg out the back, so I'm just going to cut about half of that. I'm going to leave some because I don't know, I want some of it there, but it just depends on how much is going to fit, and then we'll see what I need to cut on the inside of there. That stuff inside there is getting in the way, so I need to trim that down some more. There we go. Alright, now that is of course something that is going to actually be holding the parts together, so it's a little bit important. But as long as there's enough space for that peg to still kind of have some contact in there, let's see if this will fit a little bit better now. and it does to about there, and I think that's about the depth I want. I think I might want it a little bit deeper than that. I think that's about right. I think that was what I was thinking, to have that just right about there. So then this other half will be able to go like that, and of course that's not going to stay in there because that part is not fixed yet, but that should be able to be on there like that. Not too big of a gap. I think I might try to make that go in there just a little bit deeper, because I don't want a huge gap there between the arm and the torso. But that's pretty much it. Now I'll basically do the exact same thing on the other side. Alright, so after both sides of that are done, now it's time to talk about the vents on the top. Now I've got a few different option parts here. These are some different kind of vernier vent option parts from Kotobukiya, and then I've got a couple of different ones here from Wave. Now I want to try to find one that I think will be a good fit for this, and I think it's gonna be maybe this one. I think the winners are gonna be these two here on this Kotobukiya runner. They're gonna be right about the size that I'm gonna want for there. You can kind of have to imagine to kind of size that up. Alright, so basically what I'm going to do is have the vent in the front and then have just a rectangle portion like going out the back of that, which will then just rest up on top of the torso there. So I need to know how thick, how tall this is. So I've got my caliper here. This is just a Tamiya one, overpriced. I don't really recommend this one. It's the Tamiya Precision Caliper. I would recommend you guys just getting a digital one, and you can get like a perfectly good digital one for cheaper probably than this. So this will do the job in this case anyway, and that is about 4.5 millimeters. So I'm going to get 4 millimeters. I'm just basically going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to stack some plot plate. 4 stacks of 1 millimeter plot plate. But before we do that, we need to get rid of what's already on here. So again, it's just cutting this off and filing that smooth. Alright, so the top of there is now perfectly flat, and this blue piece is looking a lot smaller than it did before. But anyway, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about something else too here while I was saying, I'm sure I've talked about this before, but a lot of times Bandai kits will have this, well pretty much most of the time, especially on like larger flat surfaces like this. You can see on this side, see it's a little bit like sunken area here and here across the front. So if you can see that now, you're going to be able to see that when it's painted too. So you don't want to see that. You can see on this side I've just sanded that with a sanding stick. On big flat surfaces like this, really easy to get rid of that. It just takes an extra step. So you can see with just a little bit of sanding, you're going to see those areas really easily. So just need to sand this a little bit more with a sanding stick until those spaces disappear. Then you know you've got a nice flat surface. And again, in case anyone was wondering, this sanding stick is a 600 grit. That's kind of a pretty good one to stick with. And then just a little rub of the thumb there, you can see that's pretty much gone a little bit of a spot there. I might sand this again a little bit later. But anyway, it's much better than it was. Now, I'm going to build that part to go on top of here. So I'm going to use my caliper again and measure about the space of that. So I want it to be about like there to cover up that space. It's right about exactly at 1 centimeter, so that'll be easy. 1 centimeter long, and then how wide? Well, it's just about 7 millimeters wide, but actually, I guess it doesn't really matter how wide it's going to be because it's going to be as wide as this part here, which is a little bit smaller, just barely. But anyway, so like I said, I'm just going to be building it straight out the back of this, so it really just matters the length more than the width. Alright, so once those pieces are cut out, then it's just the same thing again, just gonna stack them up, glue them up together, wait for that to dry. Alright, so once we've given that glue some ample time to dry, I'm going to basically take this block piece and glue, well I need to fix it up, right? All these 4 plates there are all uneven, it's just not right. So what I'm going to do is just file the front of that flat, and then I can glue the vent onto the front and then file the other side so that it all comes together and then eventually looks something like this. So I'll do that here in a second, but so as you can see, once that is all done, we have our nice little like block vent piece which will just fit on top of there like so, and then we have a much more substantial vent there, very large, and a much bulkier look to the torso. So I won't glue that on just yet. We have some filing to do on this. So like I said, I just want to file the front first and then we'll go from there. So a little glue on here, and a little glue on there. Put that together. Now the height of the vent is actually slightly, it's like 1/10 of a millimeter taller than the stack of the 4 plot plates. The 4 pieces of plot plate should be, they're 1 millimeter each, so it should be 4 millimeters. The vent width is probably like 4.1 millimeters, so it's a little bit taller. So anyway, that'll get flattened out once we shave down the sides. So you can see now basically any white that's like sticking off to the sides, that'll all be just filed so that it's just flat, flush with the gray of the vent there. And then we'll look nice and even like that, and then I'll just kind of like bevel the edges on this piece as well. So it'll just make a nice piece like that. Now what I could do, if I wanted to actually paint this like a separate color or something like that, is it's a really good opportunity to just add a magnet in there. Just drop a magnet in there, drill up underneath here, drop a magnet in there, and then that can just magnetize onto there really easy. But since I'm probably going to be painting this torso all the same color anyway, really don't need to worry about that. In this case, it really wouldn't serve any purpose at all. Alright, so while the glue is drying on that vent, before I can finish shaping that up, let's take a look at finishing up this mod here for lengthening the torso. So I've got my plot plate stacks here that are now done, and these could be, I could just go ahead and glue this onto here like that, but then I need to drill a hole through the bottom of here for plugging this onto the waist section. But what I want to do is I'm just going to drill a hole first, and I think that'll be easier rather than having to drill into these parts and possibly damage any of the connections or anything. I don't know, I think it'd just be better to just glue or drill a hole first. So I'm just going to drill actually 4 holes, just 1, 2, 3, 4 in the center part, and then just cut that out so I have a nice big hole. I could use just a larger drill bit. If I had like a bigger one, I could just drill 1 big hole, but this is the largest that I have here at my desk at the moment. So just going to put this right about in the center and just put 4 holes in this. Alright, there we go. 4 holes in, and then just a little slice and dice. And there we go, 1 big hole that shouldn't get in the way of anything, so that should line up just fine there. And now I can glue this together, and then we can wait again. Alright, so after taking a while to get this kind of shaped up and starting to be kind of done with this extension, I was testing it out on here, and it actually still fits even despite adding the 3 millimeters to that. It actually still fits on that peg. That peg is long enough, it still reaches the poly cap inside of there barely. But even with that, I'm thinking that it's longer, but it still just doesn't really look that good. I mean, it still just looks very static, and it just looks a little bit longer. So I'm not really too happy with that. So what I think I decided to do is I'm going to take the middle section out of the gym as well. Now it actually is going to be, I think, probably pretty easy, and what it's going to involve is what I was planning to do is probably taking the hip section out of here, just the hip part, and then just putting that into here. But I think I'm probably just going to do kind of the opposite now, just basically take these hip parts of these waist parts. It's just like a front and back piece of this waist armor, and then I'll have to do some cutting, but anyway, make those to fit onto here, and then that way I can just use this hip, all this hip part here, this middle of the waist section there, and then using this middle section will be really easy with that. That'll just connect into that, no problem. So then basically it's just a matter of making this fit onto the top of this midsection here, which I think will be relatively simple as well. So basically if we take all of this stuff off of here, you can sort of get the idea of how that middle section will just be a lot better looking, I think. Now one thing is that this kind of almost fits straight onto there, except that this middle section is a little bit wider here. This part from front to back is a little bit deeper than this hole here. So a couple options. I could cut this hole a little bit bigger, but there's really not a whole lot of room to cut that bigger. I can cut maybe like 2 millimeters there out of the back. They'll be getting really close. Or what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to set some plot plate in between here and just extend this out like that by about 2 millimeters. So I'm going to take probably 2 times 1 millimeter thick plot plates and just make this torso just 2 millimeters deeper like that. So I think that'll probably work out pretty well. Won't be too difficult. So I think that will probably pretty much wrap up this work in progress video. This one's gone on long enough. I was hoping to finish kind of like the major modifications to the torso in one work in progress video, but I guess that's just not going to happen. It's going to take more work than I expected. Surprise, surprise. But so we'll continue on with the torso modifications in part 2. I'll just be kind of extending this out a little bit, making that fit onto here. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to be able to just use a peg. So you can see here, I think maybe just adding a peg up into the bottom of that so I can just plug onto there might be pretty simple. Or using a magnet I think might also be a good idea as well. So I had to figure that out. It's going to take a little bit of work just to make this adapt onto there. I don't think it's going to be too difficult though. And then we can start on some of the smaller modifications on the torso as well. One thing I want to do is just make this red part for like the front middle section a little bit taller. So again, that's going to be relatively simple, just adding a plot plate onto the top of that and reshaping that a little bit just so it has just a little bit different profile with this red piece on the front. So more work on the torso in the next part. That'll be coming in a few weeks. Like I said in my recent video, if you guys haven't seen that, I mentioned I'm going on vacation for about 9 days, so I won't be around for a while, and then it'll take a few more days working on this before I get to the next video in this series. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying this series so far. Still got a lot of work to do, as you can tell, but I think it's gonna be pretty cool when it's all done. So I like how it's going so far. It's fun to be working on something like this. So thanks for watching, guys. Leave any questions and comments, all that down below. See you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.